All right, my friends. So essentially, we've gone through the majority of our things that we need to go through for this class in terms of the research. You've done your research project. Now we're just going to talk about publishing and getting things into journals and things of that sense. So tips and tricks for getting published in a peer-reviewed journal. That's kind of what we're looking for today. And so if you want to contribute to the field meaningfully, you have to do some kind of research. And so the primary reason to publish is to ensure that your work has its impact and that the research that remains is impact. Research that remains unpublished cannot influence policies. It cannot change things. So if you come into this great information and you don't publish it, pointless. Not entirely pointless, but basically pointless. You're not helping anybody. Yeah, makes sense? So that's essentially why we publish. We publish because it gives you more credibility in the field as well. And so essentially, you're contributing to the field and you're gaining authority by publishing, especially the more prestigious the papers are that you're publishing in, the better it looks for you.
One quick question on that. Do you necessarily have to be an academic scholar to do so, or can you just be like somebody who, like say, I'm in the field of cybersecurity and I've come across a way just out of the blue of, oh,
well, if it's a research,
this improves cybersecurity.
If you've done research and it's good, then you can publish it there if it's accepted in that term.
Oh, so I'd have to find in that case a cybersecurity journal.
Yes.
Okay. I always wonder about such things. Like, it just seems very political. Like, you got to be an established academic or something.
No, not necessarily, but you get there.
All
right, so the academic publishing landscape is relatively big. There are tens and thousands, 10,000s of journals out there covering virtually every discipline that you could possibly think of. However, this abundance that exists could be a little bit overwhelming, and so that's not always fun. So you have to make it crucial to understand how to navigate the system if you actually want to get this published. So you have major publishers like Springer, like Wiley, which dominate the fields, but smaller publishers and open access journals, they also play a significant role, and they could be a really good gateway into the bigger publishing as well. So what happens is that each journal has a unique scope, it has its unique audience, and it has its editorial standards. So you have to select the right one for your work, okay? If you are, the same thing goes with social media posts, right? If someone has a niche on cooking and they start posting videos on cars, does that make sense? No, right? Because the followers that are there are not necessarily interested in cars, they're more interested in baking, okay? So you have to find your audience and kind of work that, or you have to find the journals that represent your audience. The publishing process typically follows a structured path. So you have a submission, you have a peer review, you then have revisions, and then you have publications. So the first step is submitting a manuscript that aligns closely with the journal's outline or the journal's scopes and guidelines for what they want to do. Then you have editors, and editors perform the initial screening, so the desk review, to determine if your manuscript actually is worth publishing in their journals or it's not. And so they have to figure that out. If they accept it and they review it and they like it, then experts in the field evaluate the work's originality and the rigor and how good and effective it is. So competitiveness of academic publishing cannot be overstated. Journals often have this very low acceptance rate of about 10% of the journal. So let's say all of us submitted the papers, only 10% will actually get their work published. And so this is for high impact publications. So what you want to do to increase your chances, you want to familiarize yourself with tools like Scopus and or Elvisor Journal Finder, which help identify journals that are suited for your work. So they may not be the huge big journals, but they will be journals that are good for you, and they're good at least to get you started. And eventually, hopefully, when you get more and more known, more things show up. So now let's talk a little bit about peer reviews and what happens when we have someone else looking at that. Does anyone know what a peer review is? Go ahead. What do you think?
This would have your word to things together that people confess that it's
Essentially, right? By people who are your peers, by people who are also in the field. So peer review is this gold standards for ensuring academic integrity and quality. So essentially what it is independent experts evaluating your work to ensure that it meets the journal's standards, and papers that do not pass this stage are essentially rejected and they go away. So they have to meet the standards, whether it's in writing or in content or whatever it is. So if your paper moves to peer review, it's evaluated by 2 or more referees who provide detailed feedback and recommendations for you to make it a little bit better. And so this feedback, it leads to one of 4 outcomes. So either they accept it, so yay, you're good to go, or accept with minor revisions. So you just have to make a little tweaks here and there. Revise and resubmit. So you're talking about major revisions that need to happen in your work for it to be accepted. And lastly, rejected. That's the 4th one. That's what would happen as a result of the peer review. So responding to reviewers' feedback is absolutely critical and it is very important. You want to have a skill to do that. To be able to do that, you take a systematic approach that addresses each comment thoroughly and explains how you revise the manuscript in response, okay? So you submitted the manuscript, they gave you some feedback. It's not just general feedback. It's very specific feedback, and you have to address that feedback in order for you to move on and actually get your paper published. And you have to say how you addressed whatever it is that they told you to address. And so things that you should do is be polite and professional, even if you disagree with the reviewer's viewpoint, right? We don't want to get defensive. We don't want to start yelling at people. We don't want to get so upset, throw the manuscript away. That's not what we want to do.
What do you do in that case if the reviewer doesn't, I mean, obviously, it's like a job interview, you say, thanks for your time. Do you go then to another reviewer or something?
No, so they'll come back with one of the 4 things.
Mhm.
So either they're accepted, or you'll have minor changes, which you will make, or you'll have major changes, which you will make.
Oh, so they'll just give you a chance
Or-
to fix it and resubmit it.
Yes, or they will outright reject it. If they outright reject it, then you figure out something else to do. Maybe you go to a different publisher, maybe you go to a different journal, but essentially they would have rejected.
Okay. Thank you. Well, it's good to know they'll at least tell you, you need to fix this and this. and this.
Yeah,
That's-
otherwise they won't publish it.
That's a good thing. I'm glad they'll give you a chance to.
All right, so how do you avoid, yes, exactly. So how do you avoid these rejections? To go back, desk rejections occur when editors decide not to send your manuscript to a reviewer. So it's not even worth being reviewed by your peers. You want to get through that stage to begin with. And so that can be really frustrating because, well, no one even looked at my work. Okay, how do they know that it's terrible? So there are certain things that you can do that will require really a careful preparation. One of the most common reasons why there is things like this gets rejected is mismatch between the manuscript and the journal's scope. You know how there's anyone applied on LinkedIn for a job with the easy apply? You just keep hitting easy apply until you die, essentially, but you don't really look at the job. hoping that one would land. You don't want to do that for this, okay? So submitting your manuscript to a journal that is not of the same scope or doesn't speak to your audience, it's gonna get rejected. So you want to curate your choices so that you can actually choose the right journals that will minimize the fact that you will get rejected. Okay. So that is the first thing. You thoroughly review the journal's aim, their recent publication, and their submission guidelines before ensuring to submit your work or to make sure that your work is a good fit for them. Which also, if you're looking for a job, that's probably something that you want to do if you want a good job that you like. Okay, cool. Manuscript quality is another critical factor. So submitting poor written or poorly formatted papers signal to the editors that the researcher has not been rigorous in their research and they're not, or in their preparation, and they're not very fitting to be in this place. So you want to invest your time in proofreading and editing your manuscript, and even consider using a professional editing service. It's very easy for us not to see our own mistakes, especially in writing. Have someone else review it for you, or a really good trick also to make sure if the sentences make sense is read it from the bottom up so that you're reading each sentence individually. Does that make sense? So instead of saying how to avoid desk rejections, match your manuscript to the journal, like in that order, I would read, provide clear significance and novelty. Submit polished, error-free work. So if you work backward, you're reading the sentence itself, and you make sure, or there's a higher chance that there aren't problems with it, errors with it, because the way you're proofreading it is different. Whereas if you're just reading through something you already wrote, you read what you think you wrote and not what you actually wrote. Another thing that helps you not get rejected is a really good cover letter explaining why your manuscript is a good fit for the journal. And so you're looking for to briefly summarize its key contribution and highlight its relevance. All right. So now we're looking at selecting the right journal for you, and that is the most strategic decision that you could make. What you want to do is you want to begin by identifying journals that have published similar work to yours. Look at their scope, their audience, and recent issues to be able to determine if this is actually a good fit or if your research aligned. And again, we've mentioned some research finders that help you find, or journal finders that help you find which journals work for you. There's another thing like journal metrics, and you're looking at impact factors that provide insight into the journal's reputation and influence. However, this should not be the only thing that you look at as when you're deciding the journal, okay? So is this journal very reputable? Is it not? There are scales that would let you know that. All right. You also want to be wary of predatory journals, which lack rigorous peer review and often exploit authors through high publication fees. So you do not want to go through places where you have to pay a lot of money to get your thing published. Yeah. So how do you prepare your manuscript? Well, a well-structured manuscript, it enhances the readability and ensures that your method is clear and what you did was actually very easy to observe. One model that they use is called the FISH model, and it's a framework that starts with the head, so the introduction, then the body, which is the methods and the results, and then conclude with the tail, which is the discussion and the conclusion. If you look at a lot of research articles almost any research article, that's what it is. That's how it looks like. So it looks like the fish, right? So you have the head and then the tail, and this would be the introduction, then what you did, and then the discussion and the conclusion. So in the introduction, you provide the context for your research, you clearly articulate the problem and state the objectives. And this section should capture the reader's attention in a way that keeps them captivated and keeps them wanting to learn more about your researches. Bottom line, it's all about storytelling. In the methods section, you're looking at your research design. So what did you actually do? Your data collection and analysis procedures, ensuring that there's transparency and it's reproducible. What you're going to do in part 5 essentially is that you putting all of your stuff together. We've done all of the work for this class. For our project, essentially what you're doing is putting it together in this. Cool? And then the discussion, it ties everything together. It interprets your findings in a context of existing literature and highlights its implications. So the abstract, the title and the abstract are actually very important. They are what people read first to determine if they will or will not read your paper. So you have to make sure that it is, it delivers high quality information without being a burden. So essentially you have your title. Your title should be short, specific, and engaging. So for example, instead of a generic title like a study on social media marketing, you want to aim for something a little bit different, like leveraging social media analytics to drive consumer engagement and quality analysis. Okay, so that sounds completely different. It tells you what it is, it's very specific, and it's a very engaging. Sorry, my curls are being very fuzzy. And they're really being annoying. All right. Okay, so the abstract serves as a concise summary of your paper, typically limited to 250 words. It has to have a clear objective and a clear overview of the method and what are the key findings that you did or you found in your research. Cool? So it tells people what they're walking into. And the methods section is probably the backbone of your manuscript, and it provides the roadmap for how your research was conducted. So it should include enough details for another researcher to be able to replicate your study. And this means clearly describing the study design, what you did, how you did it, and what it took for you to be able to use it. So the specific tools, software, statistical models, all of these fun little things should be included in your methodology. And then be mindful of your audience when presenting your data. So while statistical metrics are essential, they should be accompanied with a clear explanation. Don't just throw the number in there. Let people know what that number actually means. And then you have the discussion section. And the discussion section is where you interpret your findings, you connect them back to a research question, and you place them within the context of existing literature. And here you address the limitation of your studies openly and honestly. So what were some of the challenges that you faced? And you conclude the discussion by outlining practical implications, policy recommendations, or direction for future research. And then the other thing that we're looking at is collaboration and impact. Collaboration is a very powerful way to enhance the quality and the impact of your research. So your studies should show that international collaboration leads to higher citation rates. So reflecting their broader book. So when you're collaborating with researchers from different institutions or country, it brings diverse perspectives. So one thing that you want to do, if you're doing research, you don't have to stick to the people in your institution. You can actually reach out to other companies or other universities or whatever. So let's say you're doing research for a particular company. Well, you can take that research and you could expand it it's kind of like when influencers work together. Yeah. And so you're tapping into both audience and it gives more credibility. It's the same thing, but for research. You always want to include ethical considerations. So these are the non-negotiables in research. You're looking at plagiarism, duplicate publications, data falsifications are all serious breaches that can damage your reputation and result in legal consequences. So you want to make sure that this is not happening. Transparency and who did the research, the authorship of the research is also very, very important. And you can use tools like Turnitin or other ones to check for any unintentional plagiarism that could have happened as a result. Another way that you could publish is open access publishing, which is increasingly popular option for maximizing visibility and impact of your research. So this is a little different than traditional publishing models when access is restricted to subscribers. This is open access that is freely available to everybody.
Would that be like making a YouTube video about a particular?
No, you're still doing a research paper. So you're still submitting it in the same way. So there are two main types of open access. You have golden and green. Gold open access involves publishing in journals that charge the author a fee. So they will charge you as the author, and then the green one, and that's how the articles are accessible to everybody. Whereas the green one allows authors to achieve a version or archive a version of their paper, often the peer-reviewed manuscript in a repository or personal website. Okay, so essentially, research, you get to see research here at the university because the university pays for these subscriptions, but people who do not have access to them will have to pay for them, right? So there has to be a way to keep these publications going. So either you pay for it, that way the subscribers don't have to, or they have a subscription model. So you're looking at navigating this submission and revision process, and that begins with a really good persuasive cover letter. This is probably the first opportunity to convince the editors why your manuscript deserves consideration. You want to clearly articulate the novelty, so how new is this exciting thing, and the significance of your research and why it aligns with the journal's scope. Once you submitted your paper, you have to address the reviewer's comments point by point. Most papers require revisions, that's just a fact. And also you have to plan for rejection and resubmission. So even well-crafted manuscripts can be rejected due to factors beyond your control. So a mismatch in the scope or the journal's priority. So the scope may actually match, but it may they may have different priorities. Maybe they are focusing on a different topic right now, and that's the priority of what they're trying to get into this publication. Okay. So if rejected, use the feedback constructively to improve your manuscript before submitting another one, or before submitting it to another journal, and keep a list of potential alternative journals in mind. And remember that persistence is a normal part of academic publishing. You have to be persistent in process. So publishing your research is probably the first step that you need to get done. The second thing is promote it to ensure that the research actually gets to your audience. And you have to begin by sharing your work on academic platforms like ResearchGate or academia.edu and institutional repositories. These platforms, they help you connect with other researchers in the field. You also want to leverage social media platforms, so things like LinkedIn and X, to expand your research beyond academia. So you can share key insights, infographics, or links to your paper that makes people want to read this, this research, and so forth. And another thing that we're looking at for tools and support, Researchers Academy provides access to tutorials, webinars, and courses on topics ranging from manuscript preparation to navigating the peer review process. So you're not alone and it doesn't feel so daunting. There are other people who have gone before you that have created these resources. And obviously a really good place is your university library. They can help you with that process as well. A lot of libraries have things like Turnitin to check plagiarism, EndNotes for reference management, and things like that. All right, so again, your research has to be impactful, ethical, publishing has to be impactful, ethical, and well-structured. You have to engage with the reviewers and the collaborators, and you have to use your resources to navigate the publishing. Any questions? All right, my friends, that is it for this one.